gluten-free cookbook author Helen is joining me in the kitchen to make beautiful gluten-free tarts. Unheard of.
Yes, gluten-free pastry is quite daunting
Yeah.
for people who have never made gluten-free pastry before, even anyone who's made regular pastry. But it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It's actually really easy, and this sweet shortcrust pastry is the basis for all my pies and tarts. It's so easy to make and really delicious.
I guess the only difference is obviously the wheat involved. Instead of using the good old classic plain flour, we're going to be using this variety of very interesting seed-based flours.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of them are just regular flours you can find in the supermarket, like corn flour, for example.
Yep.
Corn flour is the basis of both of my pastry recipes. It's really light and delicate and it has a neutral flavour, so it's perfect for pastry. Okay, so to start, we're going to combine our dry ingredients in a food processor. So let's start with the corn flour, Justine. Let's just throw that in.
Sure.
We're going to add some sweet rice flour, another neutral, light, delicate white flour. And to that, we're going to add some sorghum. Sorghum is great. It's a superfood, really high in antioxidants, protein and fibre, and it's going to help give our pastry some structure.
Nice one. Okay, in it goes.
And now to that, we're going to add our icing sugar to sweeten our pastry, and almond meal. Now, almond meal will give our pastry some beautiful buttery notes, and almond meal is also great in pastry because it stops it from going soggy. So if you're making like a pie or a tart or a flan that's fruity, just sprinkle some almond meal on the base and it stops it from going soggy on the bottom.
Fabulous. Mix that up.
Mix that up.
Okay.
We just want to blend those flours.
All right, done.
Okay, so now we've blended our flours and we want to add our wet ingredients. So we're going to add 1 egg, Justine, just crack that in.
Now, Helen, this recipe is in your recent book, Hungry and Fussy.
Yes, it is. So I wrote a gluten-free baking cookbook because that's what people struggle with the most. When they eliminate gluten from their diet, what they miss most is baked goods, beautiful fluffy bread, spongy cakes, crispy biscuits. So I focused on baking to show just how easy gluten-free baking can be and delicious.
Absolutely. And there's still butter in it.
Yeah, so we're going to add our butter.
Yep.
So add that to the mix, and what we're going to do is just whiz that up to form fine breadcrumbs before we add our water.
All right, fabulous.
So our pastry has a breadcrumb-like texture now. All we're going to do is add 1 to 2 tablespoons of water so that the dough just comes together. Don't add too much water because you don't want to toughen up that pastry. Just enough to form a ball of dough.
Perfect.
Okay, now Justine, we need to tip that dough out onto some Glad wrap. So can you cut a sheet of Glad wrap for me? What we're going to do is we're going to pop that pastry into the fridge for an hour to rest. So we rest it to ensure that there are no cracks or shrinkage when we're baking. And we're just going to form it into a disc so it's easier to roll out when we're ready to make our tarts. So we're just going to cover that up, Justine. If you could pop that in the fridge for an hour to rest for me, that'd be great.
Great. All right, Helen, that's firmed up nicely.
Great, so we're going to unwrap that pastry now. And what I like to do is cut my pastry into sections and only roll out one bit at a time so that the pastry doesn't melt in the heat.
That is a great
So
idea.
I usually cut it into quarters, and then we can pop the rest of the pastry back in the fridge, Justine, while we're working with this one piece. If you wanted to pop
Does
that
this
back in.
freeze well? Like if I wanted to put it in the freezer and use it, defrost it a
Yeah,
little?
you can.
and-
I freeze it for up to a month.
Oh,
You just
good.
wrap it tightly and you can put it in the freezer and use it when you need to.
Nice idea.
Okay, so we're going to warm up that pastry and roll it out now, Justine. I always like to roll my pastry between 2 sheets of baking paper. It allows you to get the pastry nice and thin, and it avoids the pastry from like breaking. So we're going to roll out this pastry and get it nice and thin before we place it into a greased tart tin. So here we go, Justine. Grab that pastry, place it over our tin, press it in with our fingers. It's easy as that, and then we just cut off the edges by pressing down. Okay, Justine, can you just pass a fork now because we're just going to prick those pastries.
Sure, can do that for you.
Before we pop them in the oven, we're going to cook them at 180 degrees for 10 to 15 minutes to get them nice and golden.
Nice and easy. All right, next one. Helen, these pastry cases look fantastic, beautiful and golden brown, and we've allowed them to cool a little.
Yes, we have, and now we're ready to make our beautiful caramel walnut filling, and it is absolutely delicious. So we're going to start by making a dry caramel, Justine. Now, I personally find dry caramel easier to make than wet caramel. I find that it's less temperamental and you get a much richer caramel flavour. So we're just going to let that sugar slowly dissolve in that fry pan. Don't agitate it too much because we don't want it to crystallise.
Exactly.
And now whilst our sugar is dissolving, I'm just going to put some cream onto the heat.
Okay.
So we're going to use half a cup of double cream. Now the reason we're heating our cream is because we want our cream and caramel to combine at the same temperature, because we don't want, if we put cold cream into the caramel, it's going to seize up.
Exactly.
All right, Justine, can you please whisk 2 eggs for me?
Sure.
And we're going to add that to our mixture when it's ready to go. So I'm just waiting for that caramel to start dissolving.
So over the years, have you noticed a lot more people have become gluten intolerant, celiac?
Yeah, so a lot more people are being diagnosed. So in Australia, 1 in 70 people have a gluten intolerant or celiac disease, but only 80% are ever diagnosed. Because the symptoms can be non-specific things like tiredness or fatigue.
Yeah.
Like who's not tired after a long day at work?
Exactly.
So they can often get overlooked. So people are being more proactive now and doctors are screening for it now.
Yeah. All right, Helen, that looks good.
Yeah, so our caramel has dissolved, as you can see now. I'm just going to give it a little stir to get those last few bits melting in. Now stand back, Justine, because I don't want it splattering on you. So you've got to work quickly here.
Yep.
And what we're doing is we're creating a beautiful caramel there by combining our warm cream with our melted sugar. So what we're going to do now is slowly incorporate that butter, 1 cube at a time, please, because we want it all to incorporate nice and smoothly. Look at that golden, rich caramel. Isn't it gorgeous?
So good. It smells even better, doesn't it?
I just love this caramel poured over ice cream, to be honest. It's just delicious.
Yum.
So our butter's almost completely melted. So what we're going to do now, Justine, is incorporate those whisked eggs. And then after we do that, the last thing to do is to add our beautiful chopped walnuts. In they go. And that's it. It's as easy as that. Now what we're going to do is pour this filling back into the tarts and we're going to pop them back in the oven for another 15 to 20 minutes to allow them to set.
Lovely.
Okay, Justine, so our buttery golden tarts are ready to eat.
They look divine. Sticky, treacly, perfectly set. And we've allowed them to cool too.
Yes, just how we like them. Now, if you could dust our tarts for me with some icing sugar.
Sure can.
These tarts aren't too sweet, so they're not overly decadent, but they are quite rich.
And should we put a bit of cream?
Yes.
Speaking about rich.
No amount of cream is ever enough, Justine.
It's in a different category, right? Yes. And I see you've left just one over here. I'm going to cut into this because I just want to show everyone how gorgeous they look in the centre. Crunchy.
And chewy.
Chewy.
Crunchy and chewy. That's what you want, Justine?
That looks absolutely delicious. Well, I'm going to have some cream on mine. Are you going to have some cream on yours?
Yes, please.
Puffy.
Extra cream for me.
All right. Bon appetit. Cheers. That pastry.
I love the textural combination of the nuts against the buttery caramel.
It's absolutely divine. You know what? Even if you're not gluten intolerant, this is a great pastry to have in your repertoire. It's absolutely delicious.
and so easy to make.
Helen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Justine.